Absolute Superman #1 is a tough issue to get through. Today, of all days, the day after election 2024. I actually mean that in a good way. This issue is powerful and poignant and relevant, but it's powerful, poignant, and relevant for different reasons than it would have been had Kamala Harris won the election, in my opinion. Perhaps you'll see what I mean. In Absolute Superman #1, we find out that when Jor-El and Lara, Superman's parents, were alive on Krypton, there was a definitive line between the upper class, the ruling class, and the lower class, the serving class of people. Both Jor-El and Lara had opportunities to be in the upper class, but because they spoke out and were honest, they ended up in the lower class, the serving class. We also find out that the planet Krypton was destroyed because of an environmental crisis that was largely ignored by the upper class scientists. Jor-El, though, as a lower class scientist, was warning people about it. And then in the present day on Earth, we find Superman amongst a group of miners who are being forced to inhale asbestos as they work by their big corporate bosses, which is, of course, hazardous to their health. Everybody getting this so far? The book also does something kind of interesting with Lois Lane, but that doesn't really factor in too heavily to what we get in this issue. Our penciler, Rafa Sandoval, delivers a career performance here. Really proud of him for what he accomplishes with this issue. He's been turning in great work for a long time. You know, Superman was created in the 1930s by two Jewish boys as a champion for the downtrodden and the oppressed, as somebody who used his superpowers to cut through corruption and greed. This issue, as much as any other opening statement I've ever read on Superman, really captures that fighter for the underdog spirit of the character. And quite frankly, that's largely the Superman that we need right now. I'm somebody who's been critical of our author Jason Aaron's work in other places and at other times, but I am really proud of him for what he accomplished with this issue and what I hope he continues to accomplish with this Absolute Superman book. You know, again, the timing of the release of this book, coming out the day after Election Day, is a little too perfect for me. I can't help but wonder if DC did that on purpose, and if they did do it on purpose, whether that was a good decision or a bad decision. I guess maybe it depends on your perspective. In Absolute Superman #2, this new Man of Steel is a little more judgmental than the one we're used to seeing. Yeah, he's kind of got his judgy pants on. I don't mean that in the sense like he casts himself as judge, jury, and executioner, but like he's judging the way that human beings from Earth treat each other and treat the planet. He's less sympathetic. But hey, you know what? Look at the cover, okay? If you had an army of peacemakers pointing guns at you, perhaps you would be a bit more inclined to judge too. Yeah, those are peacemakers, as in the Peacemaker TV show starring John Cena. An army of John Cenas. You know what? Even after 20 years of beating up his body in a pro wrestling ring, that would be pretty formidable. We note in this issue that this version of Superman can't fly, at least not yet. He can leap great distances, but he can't fly. That's yet another thing that this Jason Aaron, Rafa Sandoval version of Superman has in common with the original Jerry Siegel, Joe Shuster version of Superman, in addition to his sympathy for society's downtrodden. The art here has a nice texture to it. It's not painterly, but it kind of feels painterly. It's almost got like a soothing quality to it. It's interesting. You know, when I was a kid, my family moved across town. Not that far in the grand scheme of things, but far enough that I had to change schools. And that change completely altered the course of my life. Like, if we don't move when I'm in elementary school, I'm a completely different person now. And what's kind of funny is that that's pretty much what happens with Kal-El in this new Absolute Superman series, as is demonstrated in issue 3. So yeah, as most people I think know, in the traditional Superman origin story, Kal-El is rocketed to Earth from the exploding planet of Krypton as a baby and is raised by Jonathan and Martha Kent, etc. Well, in this Absolute Superman book, that's not the case. The Superman that we meet was rocketed to Earth as a fully cognizant, functioning child. So he still has memories of Krypton and his parents. And as we've seen in the book thus far, that shift in history has largely shifted who Superman is, at least at this point in his life. And stories like that, I guess both in the real world and in the fictional world, always interest me. Like, you tweak one little detail about a person's history and their entire life, their entire personality, their entire demeanor can change. I like that the Kal-El we meet via flashback in this issue is kind of a problem child from a schooling standpoint. He's not a perfect student, a perfect kid. It humanizes him a little bit. Ulysses Areola is how you pronounce that name, I think, and he's our colorist here, and he really does a phenomenal job of making Krypton feel distinct and memorable from a color perspective. Red is obviously the dominant color on Krypton, and I like that. It makes it very distinct. It pops really well. So after reading Absolute Superman number 4, I have a question, and I think it's a pretty reasonable and pertinent question, all things considered. Is he still Superman if he doesn't have the cape? Like, to what extent, without the cape, are we taking away his Superman-ness? Yeah, Superman hasn't always been able to fly, but he has always had the cape. That's been part of his costume since his earliest incarnation, and, you know, it's probably the most recognizable thing about the costume. I mean, to the point where in American culture, or really any culture, I would think, if you put a cape on, people think of Superman. But, you know, and for some reason this didn't register with me fully until this issue, Absolute Superman does not have a cape. Even in the imagery where he appears to have a cape. Absolute Superman has like a cloud of red sunstone dust that follows him around everywhere. Sunstone being a mineral from Krypton, so it's like superpowered, and he can envelop himself in it and envelop other people like Lois Lane in it. And like, for instance, if you look at the cover to Absolute Superman number 1 closely, you can see that that's not a cape. Like, the red part is granulated, like sand or dust. So yeah, Absolute Superman has a dust cloud that follows him around. It's like Superman meets Pigpen in that sense. I think that if you did that in the regular canonical Superman book, people would just laugh it off. But because this is an alternate take on Superman, it might work. I guess the jury is still out for me, is what I'm saying, on the character that, for one time only, I will affectionately call Pigpen Superman. This issue has a nice global perspective. Much of it takes place in Pakistan. But as we open the issue, Lois Lane is interviewing people who've had Superman encounters from around the world. There's a moment in this issue where Lois Lane, who, remember, in this series is like a soldier type, breaks somebody's fingers. This is one of those pages that you just sort of look at and go, ooh. But I mean, it does its job in that regard. We get an angry Superman in Absolute Superman number 5. And you know what? An angry Superman is a pretty consequential Superman because, you know, he could blow up the world. Speaking of worlds blowing up, in this issue we get the absolute Superman take on the explosion of Krypton, which in this version of the story, young Kal-El is older for, so he remembers. It's a lot more emotional than we usually see it. And in going back and seeing the explosion of Krypton, we see and understand Superman's motivation in this story. And we see that he's so much more determined and even angry about not letting what happened to Krypton happen to Earth. And as we've seen before, the story of how Krypton exploded is indeed a jarring allegory for how humans are treating the Earth today. I get the sense that the Superman we have in this story might start out as a little bit more of a strong man, like a little more authoritative. And I can get behind that if the moral of this story is one where Superman learns why he shouldn't be that way and how that isn't the way to do things. And as per usual, our artist Rafa Sandoval and our colorist Ulysses Ariola make Krypton very distinct and memorable, what with all the red imagery. Somebody whose opinion I respect said on social media this week that Absolute Superman is an all-timer. I don't know that I'm ready to go that far yet, but I will say that Absolute Superman is really, really good, and it deserves to be checked out. A classic Batman character shows up at the end of Absolute Superman number 6. Normally, I'm not happy about that kind of thing. I'll tell you how I feel about this, and how it might be different in just a minute. So much like last issue was all about the explosion of Krypton and what happened there, this issue is largely about Kal-El landing on Earth and how he meets the Kents, Jonathan and Martha, and what their relationship is like. This was a same but different kind of approach to Kal-El's relationship with the Kents. I liked it. I appreciated the emotion it added to this version of Superman's backstory, and I'm curious to see how it evolves and changes going forward, if it's going to evolve and change. On the subject of things growing and changing, I appreciate what I believe is going to be the character arc for Lois Lane in the early portion of this Absolute Superman book. I think that as she continues investigating the Lazarus organization and Superman, she's going to learn some things about herself, and that's interesting. Much like Absolute Wonder Woman had a different artist for its 6th issue, so does Absolute Superman. We've got Carmine Giandomenico on the pencils here, although Ulysses Ariola is still on the colors. When I saw Di Giandomenico's name on this book, I was not sure about how this was going to look. Mostly because, at least at DC, I had most recently seen him on a Joker book. You know, something that has a darker, more deadly vibe to it. Absolute Superman, very different. I think this issue works, though. I mean, it's not a jarring artistic hiccup or anything like that, and I do think we owe a lot of that to Ariola still being there on the colors. So yeah, I'm not going to tell you who it is because I don't want to spoil it, but there is a classic Batman character that shows up at the end of this issue. And to be clear, by Batman character, I mean a character that was created for Batman and his world and his stories, and is specifically designed to bounce off of and interact with Batman as opposed to Superman or Wonder Woman or somebody else. Generally, I don't like when creators do that, specifically with Batman characters and villains in Superman stories. I got mad at our author here, Jason Aaron, for doing that last year during his 3-issue stint on Action Comics, actually. I think I understand why they do it. I mean, by a lot of metrics, Batman is just more popular than Superman. Thus, it draws some more eyes, usually, to put Batman characters in a Superman story. But I also think it's kind of a disservice to Superman's cast of characters. And it almost comes off lazy sometimes. It's like instead of making Superman's characters interesting and compelling, we'll just borrow some of Batman's. With this character, though, in the case of Absolute Superman number 6, things might be different. Everything should be in the service of a good story, in my opinion, and I'm really curious to see how this character's beliefs and philosophies match up with this young version of Superman, and if maybe this character influences Superman a little bit. So I'm not sure where they're going with this, but I'm willing to give it a chance, especially because Absolute Superman has been quality thus far.